Cool. Good morning, everyone. This is my fifth DeSci Berlin. Maybe a show of hands. Who's been previously to one? Or like who's here for the first time? Let's do it like that. Okay, well, that's great. That's a lot of people. So we try to make the ecosystem very welcoming to anyone. If you have any questions throughout the day, a lot of the workshops are really designed to kind of get you to engage much more deeply, kind of with some of the concepts that have been brewing in this ecosystem for years. You may have wondered what this building is. So it's actually quite interesting. It used to be a former church. So this used to be the community kind of like prayer room where the community gathered. And over there you have one of the most prominent galleries in Berlin, the Koenig Gallery. So maybe some of you remember during 2021, 2022, there was this big NFT boom. Who bought an NFT in 2021, 2022? Okay, fair share of people. And so during this time, there was an exhibition there called Machine Hallucinations by an artist called Refik Anadol. And so it was one of the first very prominent kind of AI-enabled paintings, and that was auctioned off as an NFT. And kind of through this auction, me and a couple of friends back then, my co-founders, one of them actually went on to found Prime Intellect, which is now one of the kind of leading decentralized AI and compute platforms. Through this auction, we got in touch with Johann Koenig, the owner, and then we found out that this beautiful space became available. So we moved in here in, I think, end of 2023. Yeah, so we've been here for almost 2.5 years. Yeah. And it's a wonderful event. Like we just use it as an office. So normally, there are chairs and tables all over here. If any of you kind of from the scientific ecosystem in Berlin or abroad ever want to host a meetup or a conference, we also have meetups here regularly. Please give us a shout. Cool. Thank you so much. So a little bit about the place that we have the honor to inhabit. My name is Kohlhaas. I'm the CEO and founder of both Molecule and Bio, MolBio, short. Two teams that I think have been really had the chance and the support from funders, from investors, from scientists to be able to kind of pioneer the DeSci ecosystem. My background to be working in science, though, is quite atypical. So I'm an economist by training. And then very early on got into decentralized system architecture, and kind of before that though spent a lot of time in online biohacking communities. And we're going to speak about biohacking in a little bit. It's really seeing a huge boom, but it was really kind of my early inspiration. So as a teenager, I spent a lot of time obscure online forums where people were looking at new diabetes treatments, longevity treatments, nootropics, psychedelics, and found all of that extremely interesting from an open science perspective. So people collaborating on the internet in the open. Who knows Arrowhead? Okay, a few people. So Arrowhead to me is really was an early epitome of how science could be done open. Science about drugs or medicine could be done in the open on the internet. Cool. So the title of my talk is "The Code of Life is a Public Good, Not a Trade Secret." Right. So really coming back to this notion of science as a public good, something to serve the people for the people instead of kind of being monopolized. And I'm sure a couple of you came across this quote a couple of days ago. It was posted I think 4 or 5, 6 days ago when access to Fable 5 got restricted, right? And we have to ask ourselves, will science ever have a Fable 5 moment, right? If we really begin accelerating at a massive scale, I actually think science has had many Fable 5 moments. We just don't know about them because it simply gets buried, right? I think there's so much innovation that has gotten buried over time for lack of the existence of an open ecosystem. But so the Microsoft CEO said, "A frontier without an ecosystem is not stable." And so the core argument is really top-down, that centralized AI eating all the value is politically unstable. It will create a lot of political instability. And that the future for a frontier ecosystem like AI is one where every organization has its own learning loops. And we believe that for one of the most important frontiers of all, which is science, that ecosystem has a name. We've been trying to build it together for many years now. And it's called DeSci. There's a really interesting parallel movement, by the way, which is in decentralized AI. If you follow, there's a very prominent guy called Jake Bruckman who talks a lot about how decentralized AI is becoming, like, can actually support an ecosystem for AI. So in 2026, what I think is really exciting, people stopped waiting for permission, right? So we used to think science has to be centralized, right? Like AI by the big labs. But in 2026, people really stopped waiting for permission. And I want to just show two cool examples here. You may have heard of this. It's like that a tech guy, he got fed up that his dog was dying and that there was no cure. His dog had cancer. And so he used a combination of ChatGPT and Grok and a few other tools to essentially develop his own, I think it was an mRNA cancer vaccine. And he got it tested with several universities, got it developed, like, relatively low cost, and it worked, right? Which is kind of nuts if you think about it. It's completely nuts that we have these kind of tools at our fingertips now. All that it takes is agency, right? And now you could say, well, the average person can't do this. I'm sure this guy probably had a budget maybe of 20, 30, 50,000 of his own money and time that he put into it. Maybe less, maybe more. But the fact that this is possible and feasible on a timeline of month is bewildering. Then another thing, if you haven't listened to this yet, I highly recommend it. It's called Peptide Masterclasses. I'm sure many of you know Andrew Huberman. So kind of peptides have really been, I think, exploding in just popularity. And it's, again, like, I think, a massive trend towards permissionlessness. So I think our current generation really took its health into its own hands. There's a whole quantified self movement. Brian Johnson, thank you. Brian Johnson's longevity protocols. And then GLP-1s have kind of like mainstreamed the weekly injection, right? People used to be very apprehensive of injecting themselves with anything. Oh, very quickly, over the last 6 to 12 months, that kind of became mainstream, right? And so one could say the patient became the principal investigator. So there's a global biohacking movement now that self-experiments at scale with or without the system's blessing, which I think is really interesting, right? So I think we're seeing early kind of signs here, as we're also seeing, like, the AI system, in my view, is a couple of years more, like, the AI ecosystem is a couple of years more advanced than the scientific and open biohacking movement. But we're seeing a similar thing here. So peptides today in the US, for instance, are a $10 billion market with almost no provenance, right? Demand completely outran the system. And there's big compounding pharmacy loopholes. So this is basically what Andrew Huberman says in this talk. There's very little chain of custody and very little way to verify what you're actually injecting, which is also quite dangerous, right? So at the core, so we can look at different scientific problems, but at the core, science and scientific commercialization is somewhat broken. I think we've seen so many more advances over the last 6 months than we used to see over 5 years. So there's a big acceleration happening. But in many cases, scientists have actually been leaving the scientific, or the academic ecosystem. And I think now, due to AI, are returning. AI is also bringing a host of new people and builders into science, which is super exciting. But at the core, like, this is one of those often touted numbers. Like, what's one of the core goals of DeSci? Is to bring down this number, this giant looming, it costs $2.5 billion to develop a drug. Many of you might be familiar with Eroom's law, which is kind of was coined by someone called Jack Scannell. He was actually a speaker at our first DeSci Berlin. I think maybe at our second one as well. He's an advisor to some of the companies in the ecosystem. And he posited this law that the cost of drug discovery has doubled every 9 years, despite the science actually getting much better. The thing is, it doesn't cost $2.5 billion to develop a drug. It costs $2.5 billion to navigate the bureaucracy that we've created around the system, not to discover or to develop the drug. That can actually be done very, very quickly. It's kind of the cost of the entire bureaucracy. So there's a 96% drug trial failure rate at the moment. 15 years, roughly, or 10 years from, like, let's say, hypothesis into patient. There's about 28 billion, that's often cited number, that is wasted yearly in irreproducible research, and 50% of trials are never even published. And I think one of the core goals, so, like, why DeSci? Why do we think this is important? Why are we here? One of the core goals is to like bring all of these numbers up or respectively down, and just make it much more efficient. Again, imagine like the guy who developed a cancer vaccine for his dog. I'm sure like he spent probably 1/10,000th of what the typical cost is. Now, of course, I'm oversimplifying here, but I think one needs to imagine what could be possible. This has been something that has worried me over the last years. I think it's getting better now that kind of scientists are leaving academia in droves, joining other industries, or in some cases also scientists simply choose to work on where the money is, not actually where they have a personal like hypothesis, right? I think this is getting a lot better. So I think there's a lot of hope at the moment, but getting scientists back involved in the same way that patients are getting back like involved again, right? Like big biohacker movement actually just means patients are getting involved in testing in early trial and drug development. I think AI is enabling a similar thing for patients. So the fundamental question that I think DeSci tries to ask is like, what if science was much more open? What if science was composable? It was easily ownable. It was fundable, discoverable. Those kinds of things. Like for instance, if it wasn't for kind of that ChatGPT thing having gone viral, no one would ever know probably that this guy developed like a cancer vaccine for his dog. There was a similar case where a woman cured her own breast cancer. Did any of you guys hear about that? Yeah, a woman cured her own breast cancer. Again, similar case, and that was actually buried by the scientific establishment because she self-experimented. And so if we could move beyond that, I think we could really move into like an era of massive scientific flourishing. I'm sure many of you know this kind of meme of like the solar punk city, and if it's like, if only we did X, Y, Z, like the world could look like this. Well, we could have that if we invested into open infrastructure for science, and it actually meant it. So DeSci really is a grassroots movement. For anyone that's new to DeSci, I always, like every DeSci conference, I try to explain. DeSci is a grassroots movement that tries to that aims for the overhaul of science on open rails. So make it fundable, ownable, composable, and especially important this year has become kind of agent operable. One of the core theses that we've been kind of driving forward over the last really like 9 to 12 months is that agents can unblock a really big core bottleneck in coordination, like in project coordination, in budget management, in evaluation of kind of outputs, and that's really exciting to us. Cool. Fundamentally, we're looking at 4 primitives. So one is tokenized IP, so the ability to fund, own, and trade scientific IP on chain, which is kind of one of the original DeSci primitives. Then permissionless funding, community capital at internet speed. I'll show some examples about that later. An open data ledger, so where every output can be captured with provenance. And then I just mentioned this, autonomous agents, so AI scientists that never sleep and are always on, always operating and iterating. We've really, over the last year, so this is a bit like retro-wise, we've really come from a Discord thread, what used to be a VitaDAO Discord in early 2021, into a global ecosystem with treasuries raised of more than $50 million, over 15 million deployed into direct research funding. Liquid IP has been traded in the volume range of over 2 billion, over 90,000 global community members. Many hypotheses generated. Yeah, so like a whole lot of traction for an ecosystem that is still quite young. By the way, how am I doing on time? Okay, cool. So one thing that what we've learned over time is that hype mints attention. So it's easy to like get attention through hype, but outcomes really generate trust over time, right? And that's been one of the core challenges, that when you operate at the intersection of, let's say, Web3 and science, like Web3 is very like hype, but then like show me the outcomes immediately, right? Where's the money? Like make token go up. And on the other side, science, it takes time, right? You need to verify outputs. You need to wait until the experiments are done. But the community capital that exists in Web3 for DeSci and the will to support DeSci is real. But it's fragile, right? It moves with the market. And so you need to build around that. We've really tried to make kind of IP-NFTs work end-to-end, and we're seeing the first kind of signs of that really coming online with like real patents being filed, out-licensings, sorry, not out-licensings, patents being filed, out-licensings, and kind of research progressing further through the funnel. Fundamentally, coordination is the product and not tokens, right? So the coordination of science and different stakeholders, like investors, scientists, community members, raising awareness for something, that's the product, not a token. And so we've kind of been building on this for 8 years. So it started in 2018. We're continuously launching and experimenting with a set of new products that we think are needed to actually make this a success. So one really cool loop that is starting to close, and we're not seeing this just with one project, but there are several, is kind of a closing of this loop. And so I think a really good example, he's actually in the crowd today, he's going to give a talk later, is Arton Bio. So VitaDAO has funded over 8 million in longevity research. A lot of that early research was anchored through IP-NFTs, where you have a sponsored research agreement with the university. So kind of like a license, right, that is anchored to an on-chain IP-NFT. And Michael Torres was among one of the first recipients of an IP-NFT-backed research grant like that. It then spun out into Arton Bio, which is now a legal entity, a real-world company that filed one of the first kind of DeSci patents end-to-end based on this IP-NFT. And then in 2024, we also launched VitaRNA, which is a liquid IP asset. At its peak, I think was trading at about 10, 15 million. And so has completely up until now kind of funded the research into these are early tRNA suppressors for aging and rare diseases. And so Michael also has other projects. And so recently, I think about 2 months ago, his other project, Crossbridge Bio, his company, was acquired by Eli Lilly for 300 million. And so to us, that was a really big proof point, and to the ecosystem as well, that we're working with leading entrepreneurs that are really pushing the boundaries. So I'm super excited about Arton Bio and what's to come out of there, and just using it as an example of how we're increasingly kind of reaching escape velocity. So we'll hear from 2 organizations today, many other organizations as well, but 2 organizations. One of our core goals at Molecule is really to reduce friction around handling IP specifically, and to accelerate science. These are some of the talks that are going to be given today, or different workshops. So there's a whole lot of sessions that you can get into. One that I really recommend is from an AI prompt to a real peptide. I think it's going to be super cool. So we've been doing a lot of work on peptide engineering and essentially developing agent stacks around peptides. So the core thing that Molecule really tries to achieve is create IP as a programmable primitive. This includes the IP-NFT. It then includes fractionalized versions of IP-NFTs, then programmable data containers, and legal compliant real-world asset frameworks around this. Maybe as a little point, science is kind of, in our view, the largest untapped real-world asset on Earth. So there's been a lot of movement in the recent years to move crypto or tokenization frameworks away from meme coins to real-world asset tokens. If any of you watched things like the SpaceX IPO, there's so much secondary trading already of tokenized assets now on platforms like Solana and on Ethereum. So we really see this as a huge growing market, and where we can essentially plug a big liquidity hole, we believe, in early stage science funding. And so Molecule has been leading and developing a compliant framework around that in talks with leading financial regulators across the globe to get regulatory approval for that, to actually make it fully compliant and tradable, so that universities, biotech companies, pharma companies can actually engage with this in a compliant manner. If that sounds like you, our GC, Ben Snipes, is going to give a detailed talk about it. If you're interested in that. On the other side, we have Bioprotocol. So Bioprotocol has really served as a launchpad and distribution engine for open science. Capital formation is extremely important. But then also we've looked a lot into like how do we source and make projects visible in the first place, or how do we create them? And so there's going to be a lot of talks from different members of Bioprotocol. One that I really, really recommend, I'm just going to give a shout out, I can't talk about all of them. One that I really recommend is from Johannes Weniger. It's going to be, I think, at 12 p.m. today, talking about BIOS, which according to benchmarks, at least in like the last benchmarking at the beginning of Q2, end of Q1, kind of was almost #1 scientist on the Bix bench, which is one of the leading bioinformatics frameworks for AI scientists. And they've just made a huge overhaul of their system. Very briefly, so what does Bio actually do? Bio enables permissionless capital for science. Curate, the crowd curates which projects can launch. People all over the world can allocate capital in a similar way to crowdfunding. And so far, we've seen a whole range of really successful launches. One of the most recent ones was Peptide, which aimed to raise 50,000 USDC and was actually 32 times oversubscribed. So the global kind of interest in the project reached roughly 1.6 million. So it was a really, really successful sale. And yeah, one of the founders later is going to give a detailed talk about how Peptide actually works as a multi-agent system. To make it very brief, it's a fleet of agents that are chasing one receptor each. So Peptide essentially coordinates target-scoped agents, which each pursue a different receptor through an 8-gate computational pipeline. And then the funding that is raised is almost 100% deployed into wet lab experiments. 3 minutes, cool. Another really cool product that is actually going to be unveiled today, we have Ryan from our team speaking about this, is Open Labs. So some of you maybe came across Moltbook, when that first launched, right? And we found that a super interesting experiment in agent coordination. There's been really interesting work from Stanford as well around how do we create almost agent native science kind of debate platforms or social platforms. And this is something where we're now driving a lot of the projects that are applying early on. So you essentially post a hypothesis, you can be a human, you can be an agent, and you can challenge it through open peer review. Then you form a research project, you can spin up a team around the best ideas. And then something really interesting that we're going to unveil is that we have DeFi routed yield. So you can allocate yield into the individual projects if that's something that you want to do. And they essentially use that to pay for inference. And our head of tech told me to say this is a way to get risk-free pre-TGE exposure. You have to kind of be in Web3 to understand what that means. I'll just leave it there. So the really cool thing about BIOS is our AI scientist. The really cool thing about BIOS is this concept of being able to design medicines from a prompt. We just took the landing page live yesterday. It's ai.bio.xyz. We're working with some of the leading kind of models. So it's essentially so we're beating kind of the state-of-the-art models at the moment, and it combines RDiffusion, BoltzGen, and then PX design. So 3 models combined to create novel candidates. And then our system filters candidates to the best. It costs about $7 compute per design run, which right now is incredibly cheap, if you compare it to global benchmarks. And we're really using state-of-the-art models. At the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, though, the core goal of science is to bring products to market, right? And another initiative that we launched this year is called BioFi, which is a commerce layer for DeSci. Really saying we're going from lab to bench to consumer. With BioFi, we built a distribution layer that turns validated science into products that people can actually purchase. And we're really lucky today to have Dongsin, one of the early builders and founders from DAO. She has a little stand there with two of our first products that have been kind of DeSci natively developed. One of them is Moondrops. It's a product I use every day. It's an amazing facial serum. Was developed by leading South Korean doctors. Yeah, and is a very, very, let's say, very well-working longevity serum. Similar products in the market cost up to $250, and so our goal there was to bring something that is already validated by the market, reformulate it slightly, and offer it at a much lower cost. Cool. With that, I'm really excited to open the 5th DeSci Berlin. the goal for all of us really is to move towards a future of permissionless scientific abundance. Thank you.